Hello, is this on? Hi. Oh, an excitable, responsive crowd. It's poetry night. Hi.
Hi.
This is a night quite unlike many because it is the Scottish poetry scene is so full of talent. But we've been waiting a while for quite a few emerging poets that have done the rounds of the scene and performed, and we have loved and been waiting, as booksellers, maybe quite selfishly, for there to be a book for you to take their beautiful words home. And so Verve Press, who do some tremendous things, have given these three very different, incredibly talented humans an opportunity to put their magic on the page so you can take that home. They are each going to read a few poems, and so you're going to get a full set from each of them. And then we are going to hear from Verve, so you get a little taste of the publisher. And then you have a chance to ask some questions, make lovely comments, do lots of applauding. And then after that, you will have a chance to sort of ask any questions that I haven't asked, and then you can pick up a book and get it signed and do that bit of the evening as well. I'm conscious that for many people, you've not been out since the COVID times, and we've all forgotten how to do the being in a place with other humans. So thank you for wearing your masks. I'm going to ask you to start by just a practice round of applause. Will you join me in welcoming Roshni and Tim Cheng and Nasim? So our first poet is Nasim Rebecca Essel, who is launching Nemi Dunam. You're going to say that. Nasim is a Glasgow-based poet and journalist from Town and Ware. Her poetry has appeared in magazines including Poetry Wales, Gutter, and Modern Poetry in Translation. In 2021, she was awarded a Scottish Book Trust New Writers Award for Poetry, and in 2022 was shortlisted for the Edwin Morgan Poetry Award. She's worked on projects with Poetry and Translation Centre, the Poetry Business, and the Rugby League World Cup. She's a regular chair for events, including Granite Noir quite recently, and she is taking the stage first for poetry. Will you join me in welcoming Nasim?
Yeah.
Poets to be tall, not gigantic, but you'll wait and see me next week. So I'm Nasim, like I've been introduced, and I'm just gonna get on with it because that's what you're here for. So the first one I'm gonna do is more of a spoken wordy kind of piece, if you want to think of it like that. And it is one that I really love performing, and it kind of was the poem that got me back into writing poetry in 2019, I think, so like 4 years ago. And just for like some context, I wrote it when I was in Aberdeen, so that explains like the existential crisis at the heart of it. It's about those kind of moments that you have when you're just like really contemplative and just like wondering about everything in existence. And for me, that like quite often happens when I'm in the shower. So the poem is called Exfoliation. The razor dances on my skin, cross, up, scratch, missed a spot, back. One leg stares, soft, young, clean. Goodbye, dark hairs that dare to tumble from Asian limbs. I was 11 when I stole my Bob Ross razor for the first time. A blue bit kiss on virgin skin, just trying to fit in. Plastic beads storm the beach my body makes when it hits the water. Pressed gently on my side, hugs my hips like an annoying child. Hello, beauty. Goodbye, dead skin. Little cores of me shake, cry, flake, spin, spin, sink into waves. What had they seen, these microscopic me's? I hope they got to know the world, and not just the blade that severed them from the loving arms of my calves. What had they seen?
I remember reading once that it takes the human body 7 years to renew every single cell, which means that one day, approximately 1,237 days from now, I will know myself in a different way. I won't be in the body branded by bruises I can't bring myself to remember. I won't count the rosary with my scars. I won't be in a body once held by him. He will be a stranger in more than just the name. Now my limbs won't miss missing him, but that doesn't explain the hurt I feel when blood balloons at the razor's touch soreness that says a heart has missing parts. I look at my hands. Eventually, these hands will not be the hands that held my mother. These fingers will not have stroked my dying grandma's hair. I don't want to wake up one day and not see their shadows on my skin. Can I stop an exodus? I know there are thoughts that go deep into the body, reach seep into sign, twine into the marrow of bones. They say trauma is inherited in DNA and can't be shorn away, but still, I don't recognize memories of all the different incarnations of myself. So in the quiet moments of the dark, I scrape the pull away layers of all the girls I know I've been. Some cells thrive in me that I think are poisoned, but I'd rather blame my shell than my soul. And all the while, my old skin still spirals down the sink. So I've introduced, this is my pamphlet, Nemi Binam, which in Persian means I don't know. And growing up mixed in a really white area of the country that doesn't really have like a community of people that are like look like you or from the same part of the world that you're kind of from, you don't really get like to access that language in a way that other people like get to, other communities get to. So this phrase was like the only phrase I knew in Persian for like quite a number of years. And like even now, like I meet people that are like proper Persian speakers. I was on a bus in Glasgow a couple of weeks ago, and I was a little bit drunk, so it's kind of fine. And I was just like chatting to some Arabian guys, and after a while, all I could say was just like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. So it's just quite nice. It felt right. And quite a few of my poems sort of mix the Persian that I do know or the Persian that I'm learning with English. And the first poem in the book is called Zaban, which in Persian is a word that means at the same time tongue and language, which I think is just like really poetic. And it kind of explains, I think, some of what I do with, not all of the poems, but some of the poems. So I will keep that one. Zaban. My father's language is a house I cannot enter. My teeth are strangers to my tongue. It does not sit or curl or roll as it should. I cannot enter my dandans. Khaji haunts my shadow. Zabane Padariman curls and rolls like birdsong I cannot mimic. All my poems fall from my lips, haunt my saye. I don't know my father's language. Nemi dinam, I say to aunts, cousins, uncles. I mime on my khanes. Falling from my lips, Mother Histefan. I'm sorry. Forgive me, Nemi dinam. I mime to Amu's cousins with clenched fists. My family sip chai on scarlet carpets they wove without me. Mother Histefan. I'm sorry. Forgive me. Baba, your language is a whole. My zaban can't shake the key. That brings us nicely onto the next book, which is about ways that we translate words that we do know and translate people, I guess. So the format's a bit weird because like in the book it looks like dictionary definitions. So I'll do like as whatever and then give you the definition if you think of the word in that context. So this is called translating Baba. And for those of you who don't know, which I think most people do, like especially after they were made to do the kite runner at school, Baba means like dad in like a huge range of different languages, but Persian is one of them. Translating Baba as noun. Male caregiver, parent, progenitor, dad, daddy, pops, papa, Pa, Dada, old man, father, though no substitute for God. As beginning. Babies say Baba in their first canonical stages of Babel. When babies build towers with tongue-shaped bricks with lips and burst air through throats to communicate, trying to find breath with meaning, Baba is one of the first accidental sounds they birth. Second often, though not always, to man, as assimilation. Baba on the Tehran metro, Baba in Bazaar, Baba at Imam Khomeini International Airport, Baba on arrival at departure collecting baggage to deny the burgundy of your passport, to earn your crown and veil, to become no one in humid streets, to be unremarkable to watermelon sellers and cobblers. As sound. Pay attention to the plosive. But. In this alliterative barrage, you will find your father. Multiple B's are used to emphasize harshness, so discord, bamboozle, unsettle. In Baba, the B's are split by R's that try and soften the blow. It doesn't always work. As inheritance. I have my Baba's russet eyes, honey in the Caspian sun, onyx on our thunder days. The shape of my skull mirrors his own. My sister writes with his hand. My man's failing eyes can no longer tell their script apart. My brother stole his posture, his kidney stones, the scratch of his beard, both their jaws wide shut and glare in silence. What do we take from our Babas? Do we always need more than they can give? As learning, as in Baba of Dad, the first sentence small hands learned to write, right to left, Dad gave water. When Dad almost sounds like Dad, almost like father, almost like Baba. Some Babas are Baba at home in childhood, but Dad outside. In Baba of Dad, the fathers are split across their own offering, the water, this balance. As respect. Baba for the man cooking corn in Valiaspa Avenue, Baba for the taxi driver, Baba for the kebab maker in the cafe beside the house. Baba can also be used for strangers, though akhgar is preferred. As interjection. Hey, Baba. As in, oh man, oh boy, oh geez. When you miss a turn, drop a blast, believe a bombshell, forget a word you know in another language. Break yourself. Blame your father. Hey, Baba. A reminder of all the mistakes we know we shouldn't make. So I'll do a short language film now, just to mix it up. And this one is, like, I really hate the phrase, but it's got like kind of literally and metaphorically about love languages. So it kind of, it's about, it's like, I mean, I don't think he's watching, so I think it's fine. But my ex-boyfriend was Indian and spoke Hindi, and we, like, when we met, we realized there's a lot of crossover between the languages, but he was from, like, what I was talking about before, kind of a community where both parents are the same thing. So he had access to this language, and I was just, like, super excited to kind of meet somebody who knew some of the words that I knew, even if, like, you know, it was words like bread and cheese, you know. So this is a poem about, I guess, that. One Wednesday in our first November. I fill your room with candles, surprise electronic bulbs planted into polyester. The hyponachium of my right thumb hums. I flip them all by hand. Twilight rustles your blinds as I wait like Sita, nestled in a runway of jewels, a firefly fluttering with the stars. We sit among the deers and compare our cognates, chai, paneer, naan, safed, naranji, rang. We decide darling sounds the same. Though Hamesha and Bar, the Shayad Khali. When we exhaust our Zaban, you retreat. One by one, I extinguish our artificial suns. You ebb back tonight. I watch you disappear through the window. Refound moonlight strokes my cheek. I gown myself in ruby sheets that smell like you, awake until dawn, wondering how Jean and June can sound so similar when we have such different words for love. So I'm going to do one about a club that I really like to go to in Newcastle, and the context is really important because it helps you understand just like how grim this club is. So it's like free to get in, you go when you're 16, you know, it's like that kind of place. Everything's sticky. There's a cage on the dance floor which doesn't like have a door. You've got to kind of just squeeze yourself in and hope you're like conscious enough to squeeze out. Like you end up there when stuff's going like really badly. So I was there like last January. And the club is called Sinners. So there's some context. So this is an ode to sinners, 63 Newgate Street. Here's to staying out past 2 a.m. for the first time in 3 years. Here's to floors awash with booze, beer, vodka mixer, sticking to our shoes. Here's to bass drumming in our ribs, to guitar beats and remixes so loud, we are pressed like shells to each other's ears to shout secrets no one else can hear. All the club's a stage. Here's the toilet paper trains trailing heels down the bathroom's aisle. Here's the sisterhood and the ladies to rants about men, to extolling the virtues of strangers you never see again. Here's the dancing, to exercising adulthood, to hands that linger, to our favourite singers emerging from the speakers like Mithras from rock, Aphrodite rising now from the liquids that sloshed around our feet. Here's the blisters. Here's to being too old for going out, to yawns that simmer at the shores of our lips, to constellations of sweat glimmering on our filterings. Here's to the cage at the edge of all things, to the body still slim enough to squeeze through the bars, to the bright budgies writhing and thriving and smiling inside, a melody of off-key seagulls while their pals record videos that will disappear with morning. Here's to not caring no mascara has smudged. Here's to being the youngest we'll ever be. And here's to not being ID'd. Here's to £2.50 trebs, to apple sour shots, to fingers that find each other in the dark, to the dregs, to moonlight, to gods spying on us past the guards at the door. Here's to illegal plastic straws. Here's to paparazzi strobes documenting our indiscretions. Here's to beginnings, crowds thinning, reason dimming. Here's to bringing the news. Here's to jackets tied like ball gowns around our waists. And here's to him for spinning you away from the lectures. Here's to grinning against stubbled cheeks, to tiptoes and aching Achilles, to skin grazing, to winners, to the small back of midnight coats exchanged to keep you warm, to stinging mouths, to ears ringing for dawn, to the firefly glow of your last cigarette. Here's to the drunken wings we grow. And here's to your feathers, to how soft and light and tipsy their promise feels in my arms.
All of those gorgeous poems and more in this collection that you can pick up. We are now going to hear from Tim Cheng, who's tapping at glass with this one. She is a poet and teacher from Hong Kong, currently based between Edinburgh and London. Her poems are published or anthologized in Poetry, the Rialto, Ambit, Cicada, Our Time is a Garden, and elsewhere. She has spoken in transnational literary panels across the Asia-Pacific regions, the States, and the UK. Her latest appearances include Hidden Door Festival, The Loop, BBC Scotland, and she was named one of 7 female poets to know in Hong Kong by Tatler Asia. She is also a William Hunter Sharpe Memorial Scholarship awardee, WRiCE Fellow, Roddy Lumsden Memorial Mentorship mentee, and you can find her online at timcheng.com. Will you put your hands together for our next poet.
I'm saving some of the pub and porn watching and one-night stand poems for Glasgow on the 7th of March. So do come. And tonight I plan on being completely depressing because all my friends are here and I feel safe enough to do so. So thank you so much. The first poem is called Shockproof. Some trigger warnings. I do write a lot about people dying and violence. So just in case if you don't feel comfortable, it's okay. The first poem is called Shockproof. I wrote it after two people who were important to me fell from heights. One survived, one did not. One was my student, and the other was a protester in Hong Kong. I wrote that poem, and afterwards I was like, okay, maybe I should do a creative writing degree now. So yeah, this is the poem. Shockproof. There were so many ways of breaking. In one, he cried on my shoulder, hearing how mending teenage bones fractured by certain gravity the night before would take too many nails and years. In one, everyone asked if he could fill the breakage and household items with lacquer and metal powder, overlooking the burn before all that golden joinery. In one, we went to the fringe of the city, despite the city, to see the work of Earth Movement's tower by the rolling sea. Hexagonal basalt columns giving rise for the uniform contraction of lava gushing, then cooling in seabed depression billion years ago. Rocks, sacrifices, and songs. I love you, twisted. I love you, straight. I'm aware there are so many ways of breaking. They don't always lead to magnificence. In one, it doesn't matter if we could have stitches and forensic underscores apart. In one, it does. We've broken the seismic silence to points where we know more than what's not told. I'm not asking if the breaking counts as mine. I'm not a baby needing elders' protection, like a loop of jade that shatters against evil, or silver necklace that turns black, absorbing fever. I know too well that only my own unmaking can save me. I'm just a little less than shockproof. This is as much eye contact as you can get from me because this is the only poem I can remember. When I feel insecure, I recite it. Next poem is called Kindergarten. I like to contradict myself a lot. So the last poem I said that I don't need elders' protection. And the next poem is about me needing elders' protection. I was writing papers in Edinburgh and I didn't know that I had COVID at that point. So I was battling with my brain fog and whatever. And I felt so stupid. Like, why couldn't my brain function? And I thought of how everything started, why I ended up here. And this poem is called Kindergarten. Kindergarten. 1. Granny did my homework. I cried, copying the alphabets in my exercise book. Capital letters must touch the top and bottom red lines, while small letters would stay between the blue lines. The only English Granny knew was, how do you do? I love you. But she wanted to save me from the pain. She flipped over my exercise book to follow the exemplary new shapes of a language more valued than her, under the laced intricate table of the Chinese multiplication song. Her handwriting was rounder, steadier than mine. My teacher seemed to know, but she seemed angry at the fact that we copied with colored pencils. Every letter was a blunt rainbow, just because there was no pencil nor sharpener in our household. 2. Every new school year started with a new English name. The class monitor took Mary, name of the girl in our book. My teacher said, Tim, you could take Cindy from Cinderella. She's a princess. I liked it, although it didn't occur to me that the said princess was Fuigula,
Miss Gray, for who I knew the Chinese name. I went home and told Granny about this. She asked, what would my English name be? Your cheeks are red. It must be an apple. Granny liked this. Years on, she still repeats, hello, how do you do? My name is Apple. My granny is awesome. I'm really thankful for the safe space that Scotland has provided me with, because for a long time, I thought what I felt, what I thought did not matter. But meeting friends and teachers here really helped me overcome that. This poem is about meeting friends here and talking about the news. Since Marina and Grace brought me white roses, I couldn't stop playing my favorite song, same titled as the flowers from 13 years ago. I store the roses in cheap wine bottles and never recycled. They might be from the same Tesco, finally meeting at my table. Tikhanovsky jailed for 18 years over protests. Canton pop star Eason Chan cuts ties with Adidas after it rejects Xinjiang cotton. Headlines fell from our mouths. I could hear the clink of our speech and teeth being shaken in our mugs. When we hugged each other goodbye, Belarus, London, and Hong Kong touched. I looked at roses and put my headphones on. The song turned my insides into cotton. White like white moth, white fang, white like white sugar, white fuzz. A lyricist was whited out by order too. How do I boycott a singer from a song when tonight it speaks to me again? Have I lost the language of softness, or is it how fuzzy it is between being good and authentic? I thought of Eileen John, who inspired the song, who was said to laugh during sex, whose landlord found her dead, alone in a Californian apartment, and the singer and me, nostalgic for a country of small comfort. I read two more poems. My poems are quite long, so bear with me. The second last one is called She Will. It's inspired by a Scottish film, Shell. It contains spoilers. She Will. A car crash is just touching too much. The father scurries into the headlights like the roadkill he botches, the meat his daughter cooks reluctantly. Shock is when you eat and bite into the membrane of your lips instead. The daughter darts from his bed, bruised like whatever fruit her body isn't. You, lit up by your screen, choke up on the daughter's cry. How stories of the last refuge of mistakes, things unwanted in life, could just live there. The father, the daughter, shelled in their mother's wild, take turns to push each other's kisses away. They do what they do to show you how far things could carry over. But what about the day, just that one day your father cries, telling you things you think only your mother should know. He edges too close by your bed, his temperature and omen, the year you lent him, forcibly opened. Your panic is a burst kitchen pipe your father fails to stop. You escape for the first time wearing a plain white shirt, wondering if you're mistaken for your mother. You live inside a hotel mirror. This man, another man you barely know, whose hands run all over your insecurities, is sound asleep like a fetus. How do you tell what is and what isn't until you watch the daughter outrun her past? The last poem also involves people crying. For some reason, I've been choosing like people crying, poems that involve people crying. I guess it's the Pisces energy. I'm fully embracing it. And the last poem is called Few Notes. Is one of the longest poems I've written. It's about a bunch of farmers in Hong Kong who are trying to build their alternative communities. despite everything. So basically the area that they're based in is a border town between China and Hong Kong. So it's been rebuilt and reclaimed quite a lot. And what's really shocking to me was they told me that 50 years ago, Hong Kong used to produce half of our own food, but now we are only able to produce 1.5% of our own food. And I was like, why are you so stupid? Why do you keep doing it? So I kept visiting them, I think, I first started from 10 years ago, and then the last 4 years, I kept going back and forth to them. And the poem is in 6 parts. And it's basically me thinking about things and they telling me things. And it's called Food Notes. Food Notes. From the soil we make our sun. From the soil we make our sun biscuits. From the soil we make our sun biscuits stored in ceramic bowls. From the soil we make our sun biscuits stored in ceramic bowls made with the same soil. From the soil we make our sun biscuits stored in ceramic bowls made with the same soil we dig, burn, grind into red dusts. From the soil we make our sun biscuits stored in ceramic bowls made with the same soil we dig, burn, grind into red dusts, which means earthly affairs, a dream in an utterance that presupposes us. Day trips. Your son tugs at my sleeve, making me get him the red sugar cubes you prepared for our tea, zest and mint. He knows I'm eager to please, but you notice. So push away the red sugar cubes and give him biscuits instead. The biscuits look like tiny pebbles. These are sweet too. Tiny fingers, tiny bites. He's always eating, the way he abandoned his bread in the bookshelf for play last time we visited. This farm, this house, his birthplace, layered red soil, ghosts, and labor in a bathtub, sweet when taken in small doses. Give and take. Take the mugwort and rub it on your skin. Take the lemongrass spray. The bugs are used to us, we're used to the bugs. They could tell you're new here, so they go at you. Take the tomatoes, it's not a harvest, it's an explosion from the unbroken rain. I've been eating them, only eating them for a week. Take the white corn, eat them raw, a burst of sunshine. Take lok sum, take mungo, take ling tai, take feige, take tonshan, take ling jie, take all the farmers in mind too. Oh, don't forget the last batch of tofu from a friend's clothing factory. Strangeness. The potatoes I take home are tiny and firm, except for one. Rinsing the potato, I poke my finger through the mud-filled holes, scared of any sign of life inside. The mud crumbles into more mud, a hollowed-out starch maze, a sign that the earth does not taste metallic. I often think I could farm, except for snakes that slither into village houses, except for finishing the day's work before the scathing noon. Sometimes life stops changing for the smallest of reasons, such as not being able to wake up with the sun. Trust. Our son was born before dawn. We named him Heya, hope for the sun. I never quite trusted a hospital. We read and discussed with each other to decide on the bathtub. The what-ifs became shared. Not all of us agreed. The ones who stayed in farmhouse helped my home birth. We do talk about everything, like the way we shared our income, wage or taking from the communal save when needed. Sometimes we lose friends with the same belief who want it differently, but I know they're out there working. To yield. Serve, sever, hour, out. Gunshots from unseen barracks puncture the air. Some doors do not open in the village, not just these vintage cars before us, but always fire, always the bulldozer raising soil before it is taken from your hands. Farmers without farms, the city that no longer feeds itself collapses into your throat. My tears sell better than my crops, eh? Your mind, body yields to the soil, despite. The day a friend's farm shuts down, another celebrates a tiny harvest. Rice stalks bend slightly in giving. And here I bend. Thank you.
And for our last act, we are going to hear from Bird Cherry, Roshni Gallagher's debut. Her equally impressive bio. The most impressive group of young people in the world. Roshni Gallagher is launching Bird Cherry. Roshni is a poet from Leeds living in Edinburgh. She is a winner of the Edwin Morgan Poetry Award 2022 and the Scottish Book Trust New Writers Award for 2022. Her work has appeared in a variety of literary publications, including Best Scottish Poems, Gutter, New Writing Scotland, Propel, and more. In her work, she explores themes of nature, connection, and memory. You can find her on Twitter and Instagram at Roshni Gallagher. And tonight, for you all, will you join me in welcoming Roshni? Can you hear me okay? Yeah. A quiet start. I'm going to start with the poem in this small collection that I wrote the most recently, and then I'm planning to end the one I wrote the longest ago. April River. That morning, I said too much. It felt like stumbling out into the garden at night and plunging right into the pond. Later, too much followed us out on the drive and out through the fields, followed whilst the heat made moons of our upturned faces as the clouds dandelioned apart. I wanted to unloosen into the ice of the April River. I wanted to be a gill. The water was clear and cold and quiet, its depth a boulder against my belly, my eyes still sticky with pollen. In the river, I found every river I'd ever touched, meadow sweet and wet trouser cuffs. I wanted to be cleansed, like blooming silt, like water over rock. Instead, the river dappled and deepened its mirror, and I met myself unchanged. My poems are a lot shorter than the My granny dreams of Guyana. My granny looks at me and she sees herself. Her living room full of glasses, half drunk. Pictures of gods hang above the bed. She listens to a record, spinning out in another room, another house. The runt of rain and begonias, mangrove and wood slats, the parrots asleep. Things change. I try to pull quiet in to cover us. The walls sing. She looks at me and she sees herself. In the slant moon, the water, the waning bank. There's also a watery theme in a lot of these poems. Whale Song, Edinburgh and Strand Hill, North Atlantic Ocean. On my phone, I read that today the water is 5 degrees Celsius. I imagine the sea is white froth, black indigo. Below and far away, the quick heartbeat calls of minke whales, the groan and chirp of humpbacks. In my mind's eye,
I'm always standing in the same two places, up to my knees in seawater, or pulling up a chair at the kitchen table. When I spend so long thinking of the ocean, the hum of traffic starts to sound like whale song. My head is full of goats. My head is full of goats and of other looping things. I sit in the blue rolling shade of the trees, and the cool air on my face makes it feel like I'm neck deep in the sea. The day the goats broke loose, it rained so hard, waves swept down the street. Why does naming something seem to make it true as though it hadn't been before? In my mind, I watch the goats trot by again and again. They raise a racket, their tough little hooves striking stone beneath the water. Isn't it enough to say that I'm wading through the world and I'm soaked to the bone? I wasn't going to do this next one, but it's on the same page, so I'm going to read it. The Whitby. The moon is thin and poised like a curl ewe's beak, all bone, hanging over the ocean, the abbey. We watch the seabirds being swept by the wind, and I try to tell you about all my life you've missed. There are still so many sentences I can't reach. I know that out on the water, welcomed home, is a replica of the ship they took my ancestors on, to sugar plantations, the former slave owners. The Whitby, sailing from India to the Caribbean, a scaled silence blowing in off the water to greet her. Coming back here is like mutely looking down at my own odd body as it moves without me. Nothing is familiar. This loved blank cliff, a memorial stone with the names bleached out. This is a swimming poem. It's actually about Warrender Swim Centre in Marchmont, if anyone knows. Swimming pool with a glass roof. My arms look darker against the whiteness of the still water than I thought. The white moon observes me behind the glass. One day, I will own a kitchen table, and there'll be brown faces and brown faces that I just haven't met yet, and I'll bring them bunches of pink flowers so dark and full they will flow and roll off the surfaces, and their brightness will cause the air to stir. For now, whiteness and reflections of me and moon dissolving. I guess kind of a sister poem to that one that I wrote on the theme of vision. It's called Dock Leaves. Often I want to flick shut strangers' eyelids. I'm sick of anticipating my own othering. Thank God for places where people aren't. The green of the trees has always been a door to walk through and become whole. The green sinks into me and the woods beat with spires of dock leaves, deep red, like 100-fold hearts. Who dared trick me into thinking I was a guest? Up ahead, the wild silver lake exists for a brown girl to crouch beside it and try to catch the bugs. I just have two poems left. This next one is the title poem, Bird Cherry. To teach myself belonging, I tried to find the name of the blossom tree darkening by the window. Bird cherry, or sweet cherry. From the curve of its leaves, I hold each possibility of its ungrown berries in my mind. If I met my great-great-grandmother, I wouldn't know the name of the language she spoke. Bird cherry, or sweet cherry. In the dusk, the petals fall in drifts like sea foam. The soil remembers everything it used to be. Carbon, fracture, petal. Last month, the full white blossoms swelled and blotted out the sky. My last poem. I also wanted to end with a happy poem because my partner told me that they're all sad. I only see deer with you. I only see deer, she said, with you. As we picked our way around nettles, the brambles snagging at our ankles and our pockets heavy with acorns and anything else October offered us. So we reached the hollow in the woods where the earth caves in, as though some small meteor once hit. The trees have grown crookedly around it and filled the space with orange leaves. And we came across a deer, standing stock still in the sinking gloom, her eyes staring back at us like wild stars, the first to rise in the night.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Thank you all. These three pamphlets only arrived last week, which means that I have only had a week, and knowing everyone's poems, finally a week, which is not a long time for me to have poetry sort of percolate in my brain and to sit with these three, which, you know, all three of you are writing in Scotland today, and all three of you have common experience, but these are wildly different collections with wildly different tones and stories, and perhaps the greatest commonality for me as a reader was the way you all have a very distinctive way, but a real gift for distilling a moment or sort of crystallizing place that is so immersive and so beautiful. So thank you for putting these out in the world. Before I throw some questions at you, the other common thread is, of course, that these three pamphlets are published by Verve. And Verve do some very exciting things. And if you are a fan of poetry and not just a fan of these three, although you should start with these three, always look out for Verve. As a poetry publisher, they have such an eye for picking something that sounds great performed, that is written by poets who sort of are in the world in phenomenal ways, and then it does translate to the page. So before we have a chance to ask some questions and you have a chance to ask some questions, I'm going to invite Stuart up here to say a few words about, come on up and say a few words about Verve and about these three. Will you join me in welcoming the publisher?
Hi everyone. So I'm not supposed to be here. I'm from Birmingham, So that's a good reason. And also, I surprised these three earlier by turning up at their event. Horrified, they look horrified. But I couldn't resist coming up and hearing these three read. And it's, you know, if anyone ever asks me why I run a press, it's so I can hear brilliant poets and they have to read to me because I publish them. So, you know, that's the deal. I do love what I do. And on nights like this, I love it all the more. Those readings were just so phenomenal. And I don't think you're that similar, but you represent an amazing poetry scene in Scotland, which, you know, the more I learn about it, the more I see the value in it. And, you know, I don't know why Scottish poets are publishing with me in Birmingham. But I'm really, really pleased they are. 5-hour train ride notwithstanding. And, you know, I think as a press, we look for voices that are interesting and unique. There's a lot of interesting and unique poetry up here. We look for poets that aren't necessarily mainstream, aren't necessarily the zeitgeist. I think they're the future, probably. So again, you know, whenever I come up here, that's what I found. I'm super proud of these three poets. This is in the right order. They do the poems, I come after, put them in a book, and that's the easy bit, really. So, you know, I shouldn't be on the stage, really at all. But thanks for coming, and I hope you enjoyed as much as I have.
I'm going to kick off with a question, and then you have an opportunity to let some of those poems trickle through and sit with you, and then you get to ask your questions. My first one is not just are you all very different from each other in what you are really interested in putting on the page. The collections themselves have a huge amount of variety in them, and so I wanted to ask you each to start off by telling us, as writers and as poets, what is out in the world that captivates you? What is the thing that inspires you as a writer and that gets you to keep writing and that made you write the poems that have ended up in these pamphlets? And because you are beside me, I'm going to start with you, Tim.
The internet. I didn't grow up among writers, but I did grow up in a pretty artistic household. And the internet really helped. Sometimes I just Google like weird parts of a piece of furniture that I want to put in a poem. So that definitely helps. And I think coming to Scotland really gave me space to sort of process all the grief and anger that I felt before. And I even started writing poems for flowers, which I will read in Glasgow. Yeah, so I do think that being away from home really helps you look at things in different ways. And that sort of my conservation people really did help quite a lot. So, this is controversial, but I do love reading contemporary poets. And usually I would go for contemporary poets before the classics that inspired them. So, I'm making sense.
I agree with contemporary poets. I think that's what I read mainly. But I realized, like, what was it, yesterday, that all these poems are outdoors poems, and maybe like one or two of them are inside, but not really at all. So I think that's the answer, is all my poems are about nature. And start with nature, and then sort of the moment comes from there, sort of develops from some sort of time I've had outside. Yeah, I wish I could write indoor poems, but not yet.
Yeah, I don't. I feel like I just have a lot of like chaos energy in poetry, like writing things down and editing it and having sentences makes it less chaotic, I guess. So that's like, I suppose, why nobody ever asked me that. That's maybe why I write. But like, I didn't start reading poetry until like for fun until probably just before I went to uni, and I stopped reading it for fun when I was at uni because I had to read it for uni. And I stopped like writing when I was at uni and stuff as well. But it was when I came to Scotland, and like especially when I went to Aberdeen and just needed it as that space for myself. Because I always like reading. But it's like, I think what I found is community places. So like Scottish People Writers Network, for example, and like I know Alicia's over there. And a writing group I was part of sort of during COVID, that kind of people place also published by Verve, is like they just provided spaces where you could be around other writers or people that wanted to write, and like you were just given a microphone in those places. And I don't know, that's why I started doing it and sort of took it really seriously. Felt I was a writer, or it was because people like that and like Hannah Lafley and maybe Aisha Jassett gave me permission.
Wonderful, wonderful answer. Does anyone have a burning question in the room? Maybe very shy. It's okay, you'll warm up. My next question is, again, for all the differences that are in here, and the tone shifts. There's some real humor. There's some incredibly raw moments. There's a lot of tenderness, and I think in the readings you could even see just in the way we receive the poems from each of you that they leave a different impression. And so I wondered about the poems that are in these collections and the editing process and creating these coherent first pamphlets that are representative of everything, and now it finally gets to be in a book. What maybe did you have to leave on the cutting room floor, or maybe what were the poems that you always knew that was what had to be in this first pamphlet? And I am going to, well, you're already holding the mic, so Roshni first and then Nasim, and then we'll come back.
I think maybe given away by the fact my pamphlet's the smallest, these are most of my poems to the date to when I sent it to publish. And I've written some since, but yeah, I guess I largely wrote them to be read together. I think they are thematically linked. I did cut a couple out, and I cut them because they were outliers, I think, and also they weren't mistakes, which I think is the most important thing. But I think for me, the poems that like hold the pamphlet is my granny poems, and they're like the backbone on either side from the beginning and the back. And that's what tied it together.
So there's two poems for me that sort of like set this all in motion, and one of them was that first poem I performed, Exfoliation, and the other one is like the grandma poem as well. And I don't know, like for me, because I do a lot of like performing, so I'm used to like doing poetry in like bars in like, you know, pubs and stuff, and you just need to, I think, have a different kind of vibe there to a book shop maybe, where it's a lot more serious. So I try. It's a lot. We can't swear as much here, I guess. So I feel like there's a range of poems in the pamphlet that like swerve between those two places. And I sort of played with form a lot because of that chaos energy, and just because like I like how I've got a very visual brain. So like, you know, I've got like one poem where it's like you fill in the blanks of the words that you want to use. But somebody called it a trauma RPG, which I thought was a very fun way. And I like video games and stuff. So so I like to play with form a wee bit on the page, because I think sometimes when you perform a lot, people kind of rank you as that sort of poet. So playing with form has made me feel like more professional, I guess.
No, this book contains poems that made me want to have a reason to live. I think living away from poems has been really difficult for me. So I want to compile a list of sad poems that would eventually give me the power to say, okay, these are the things I love writing for almost. I left out poems that are explicitly about Scotland. I have a few here, but most of them I've left them for my full collection. And I also left out quite a lot of mother poems because I felt like I needed more time to deal with my experiences in Scotland and the fact that I don't really know about my mother. So I remember this particular moment I was writing a mother poem, an intergenerational poem, and my teacher said, the granny's voice and the grandchild's voice are really strong, but the mother's voice was a bit meh. And at first we were talking about the speaker of the poems, but they were all just about my family. So I thought that made me realize, oh, those take more time to develop. Yes, I try to respect my mother in Scotland more. So, yeah, in general, so, yeah, but they're nice.
It works. It really works. Do we have a question in the audience? Yeah, we've got one there, and then we've got one online afterwards. And if you are watching from home, do check them in the chat. I'll get you to say it as loud as you can, and then I'll repeat for anyone watching online.
I was wondering about the lessons of the draft, especially when people experience, and how much of that changes when you write in English. How would you describe that?
So there's a question about the people in field notes and a far more coherent version of talking about language and writing in a different language.
I think they definitely feel safer because it's in English. So that takes away a lot of the political concerns for them. And I did send them, like, for me, like I do write my poems in quite a mix of non-fiction and fictional way, but I try to do it the journalistic way where if I talk about a person, I send them the poem before. And I remember telling the mother of the poem, like, hey, I'm naming your son in the poem. Is that okay? And she's like, it's English. Like, it's English. Nobody cares. And Cantonese is a tonal language, so you could read it hey yo or hey yo, and nobody knows. So in a way, it feels safer. So I think, but of course, the gap would. I think another layer of concern would be like, am I making them sound a bit too foreign? Like, but I think they're okay with it so far, and I'm looking for other people to decide if the gap is doing them service. Great question.
If I could bounce a follow-up question then, for example, to you, Nasim, when it comes to language and the choice to not put translation in the text the way you just put the words on the page like the Baba poem, and if you know what it is, you can read it, and if you don't, you either look it up and learn, or you have to just roll with what it looks like. Can you maybe talk a bit about those choices in terms of how you were using language?
It's been ongoing, and it's like a discussion that I've had again a lot in like sort of Scottish People Writers Network about how much you translate or don't translate. And my relationship to Persian, like I was saying, is really interesting because I grew up like sort of picking up the language really easily as like a little kid, and then lost it, apart from like the really domestic stuff. So like, shut up, sit down, eat this, come here, you know, like that kind of thing. Like, commands for a dog, but like that's kind of what we speak to children. So like that's kind of where it was, and then I started like learning Persian. Kind of, I've always dipped in and out trying to learn, and started doing a course online like during COVID, and like learned it a bit more. But like I'm mixed, right? So like my mom doesn't speak Persian, and like my family that I know really well are like my English family, and they don't speak Persian, and I don't ever want to write something that they wouldn't understand or feel like is inaccessible. So I don't have it like on the page, and that's kind of for neatness, but also so that people don't read the words before they read the poem. But like in the back of the book, there's like a glossary which has like all of the translations in. So then it becomes like, again, like maybe an interactive exercise. I don't know. But it's just kind of sometimes like that's how I think, is like there are words that reflect things or experiences in one language, and another language doesn't necessarily sum them up. So it wouldn't have felt like, for me, if I'm writing about heritage, it feels right to sort of have those words in there. Things. I've learned to stop apologizing for doing it.
Do we have any more questions in the room? No. Online, we have a short, sweet one. I don't know if it's an easy one. Casey asks, which is your favorite poem to each of you? So I'm going to bounce that to Roshni first.
I'm going to say 2 of my own.
Yes.
Or
Yeah, I think it is, yes.
my own. Really narcissistic. The first 2 that I read, so April River and My Granny Dreams of Guyana. And they're just the 2 poems that I'm happiest with and that I like reading the most, and I think have the most in them for me. But yeah.
Have you got yours? Do you know your answer? Was it 2 or was it just 1? Just 1. Okay. I'm gonna say a poem that I didn't read, but I usually like performing. It's called Dearly Beloved, and I wrote it during COVID because, like, you know, thinking about death and stuff. And in my family, if like we're not a family of like writers or creatives, so when I started writing, it was like whenever something happened in the family, it was like, can you write a poem about it? And that was like just funerals for quite a while. So you know, people would die, like, right, we'll get Nasim to write a poem, she'll do it at the funeral, like, that's fine. And like, I was on like a walk around Alexandra Park in Glasgow, and I was just like, how do I cope with COVID? Who's gonna write my funeral poem? So I wrote it for myself. And that sounds really dark, but it's actually really nice, and it's about like reflections of life and kind of like heritage and family, and what do I want to leave behind in the world, like both physically and kind of spiritually. And that's the poem that does it. So that's probably, but it's also like the last words that I read before I took the microphone. So yeah.
My favorite ones are usually quite politically incorrect. So I don't love to read them. The title is Self-Portraits of My Granny in the Voice of Anti-Japanese Dramas Protagonists. So basically, my granny is quite delusional, and she watches a lot of TV, and sometimes she makes her life experiences. She would just say random weird things about her life, and you could clearly tell which television drama those bits come from. And I thought that was fun, but it's not exactly the most politically correct poem. But I love it. I wish I could read it one day.
Do we have, you are so shy. Look how friendly they are. Big so generous with it. Oh, two in one go. Okay, we will start here, then go back and then go to the online one. Go for it, Helen. So for the online audience, this is a question about the granny poems and what does it do for you to skip a generation and write about the grannies? Who wants to go first? Roshni, you've got the microphone.
It's a difficult question. I think, well, because I'm my dad is here. If I were to write about my parents, that would be harder because they'd read them. My grandma's not going to read them, and I think that's very freeing, like you were saying, like with the language difference. And I also think, I mean, a lot of our grannies will be coming to the end of their lives, and I think that's somewhere where poetry really shines, and I think that's also why probably we all write about our grannies as well.
Yeah, so I write a lot about my mom as well, to be fair. But I'm like the middle daughter of a middle daughter of a middle daughter. So like my grandma was a middle like daughter, and I don't know, I was like always super close to her growing up, and I just think there's like a really interesting like physical thing there. And even just like knowing like women are born with all of like the eggs they've got, right? So like when my mom was being like formed in my grandma's like uterus, like the egg that then became me was in my grandma's body at the time. And I just think that's so interesting, like scientifically and like fascinating. There's just a really interesting like connection there, I think, between women, especially, you know, like the middle child thing is just like incidental, but it's just a cool thing. So I write, and I don't know, like when I started writing poetry again, properly, like as an adult, it was just after my grandma had died. So there was a lot of like thinking about that, thinking about like who she was in the world, who she was to me. And then there's a granny poem here about like my grandma who was Iranian, who I never met because she like died way before I was born. So it's kind of imagining like what if she came back. And there's just like a really interesting like heritage link there, I guess. That I just really up with story. And also grannies are just class. Like it's great. So it's just nice to be able to like follow it as well.
I don't know, in Hong Kong, in my generation, a lot of our parents are with ill work, so they will usually leave us to our grandparents. So I was raised alongside my cousins in my granny's household until I was 19 years old. So I guess like that's like like biographical facts. But I do think I think having a gap it's nice in general. Like it takes time for poems to come up, and I think often parents are as confused as us because the moment they are parents is when we're their daughter or son. So like they are basically our age. Like yeah, the day we were born, they become parents. But grandparents, I think the dynamic is different because they have been through this before, and when they see you, they try to improve like what they've done before. And some of them can do that, some of them cannot, and I think that's fun. And also think that like grandparents are more honest. Like at least my grandmother, like at first I thought I had a sense of humor, but then later on my friends reminded me that I was traumatized with the lack of boundaries that my grandmother imposed on me since I was a kid. I was like, oh, and then I started looking back at all the improper stuff that my grandmother had done, and I was like, is she defying all the stereotypes of what a grandparent should be? And I thought that's pretty amazing. Yeah, I don't know if I'm on topic. Yes, I love you, Granny.
Love a granny question. There was another one at the back. Do you want to shut that one? Did you have a question? Yeah.
I suppose this question pertains to Roshni mostly. Just wondering, with choosing nature as a focus in your poetry, it's something that's been around forever, essentially, but it's something that is constantly being reinvented. It's quite a challenge to take on something that is ever present. There's a nice thing about it that it unites us in a way. But what is it about looking at nature? There's many different forms that invites you to tease something out of it, since it's been covered in so many ways before.
For the online audience, the short version of that very eloquent question was why the focus on nature, and what do you make of nature when there's such a history of nature poems?
I think it's nice to be able to step into that heritage of nature poems and join it. I think there's a reason why poets have always written about nature. I think as people, we're just part of nature. And I think that I'm most myself when I'm just in nature in any way. But also I think I'm bringing something different, because I think how many like Irish Guyanese women have you read writing about nature. I don't know how many there are, probably not that many. But that's true of all of us from our own personal backgrounds. So I think there's always something new to write about. Because when I'm writing about nature, I'm writing about myself. And I also write a lot about quietness and silences. And I think that's very interesting when you take that to nature, because it is silence, but it's also a way of speaking with the world without having to speak, I think, engaging with nature. Yeah.
What you're saying is reminding me of a Chinese saying, you say 天地有大美而不變. It translates as the earth and the sky has a big beauty and it doesn't speak a thing about it. So I think, yeah, what you're saying kind of reminded me of that. And your poems are great. Like you said, you're very outdoorsy, but at the same time, like your poems are so inwards. I don't know how you do it.
There's one final question online, and then I'm going to ask you to all put your hands together, and then I'm going to ask you to stay in your pews so that I can take these three out of the room so they don't get stuck behind you, Howard. And then you can go and get your book signed and ask any questions you didn't get a chance to. So the final question online was a more personal one, which is, how do you each look after yourselves when you expose so much in your poetry and on the page? So if we go around, let's start with you, Nasim.
It's not something I had to think about until I put it in a book, and like I'm now trying to make all my friends buy it. Very weird, because like performing is so temporal, and it's great, but it feels really temporal, so it's different like this. I don't know, like not all of my poems are true. Like the emotion at the heart of them is true, but like not every single thing is true about them. So in some ways, like that in itself, like the metaphors, the creativity, whatever you want to call it, like the craft is a way of protecting yourself. But also like some of it is true, and that's the bits that stress me out. But my theory is that like most of the people I write poems about don't know it's about them, or or they're just not going to read it. So I don't feel like I need to especially worry about it for the most part. And yeah, like I don't know, it has to feel true, and the emotions always have to be true. But the kind of incidences and the people, and that doesn't have to be true, I don't think. And I think that's kind of where the beauty of it comes in. It's like, this isn't an autobiography. Like it might feel like it's my diary, but it's not. Some of it is, but not all of it is my diary. You know, and people can kind of take from that what they want. And yeah, I don't know. It's like scary, but I'm not like, I don't feel like I really. So far, nobody's like slagged it off for it yet. So I don't. Nobody's been angry yet, so I probably just don't have to worry about it. But that'll make up.
I agree. It's stressful. It's stressful. But also, it's not all true, like you say. And you can always say, "Oh, it's the speaker of my poem. It's not me." Even if someone's been there and knows that it was me. That's it. I guess also between like me writing the poem and someone reading the poem is usually about a year, especially if you're submitting to a magazine. So a lot of time has passed, which makes it a lot safer to write about. And I think as well, a lot of the poems, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I said that in the poem. Like, I can't believe I'm going to read that. And then someone reads it and they don't take that at all from the poem. And so I think that's also important to remember, that with poetry, you can slip little things in and people can interpret however they like. And that's yeah, my favourite part of writing poetry.
Just thinking about moustache, like really nice. Yeah, I think I've been overproducing over the last year. So I've come to a point where I have to accept that I can't be producing things all the time. And I don't have to constantly feel that I need to prove myself to anyone. Which is ironic because now the book is out and like, I don't want to kill trees for no reasons. But yeah, I guess being really useful, get a massage.
hang out with friends, drink a lot of water. I'm really bad at self-care, so but these are things that poetry isn't the most important thing, although it's quite essential. It's not super important. I mean, I would choose a glass of water over a book. Controversial note.
Thank you all so very much for your generous performances, for your beautiful collections, for your wonderful answers. Will you all join me in putting your hands together for Roshni and Tim Cheng? They are only £7.99, well done, Verve, which means that if you have a £4 ticket, you can get poetry for £3.99. So I'm just leaving you with that while we make our exit.